Welcome back. In our previous lecture, we outlined where qualitative research is heading, and I'd like to bring us back to this guy for a second. Ah, yes, the VR guy. Now, let me tell you, I've been a devoted video gamer most of my life, but I avoided a lot of the hype about VR and finally bought my first VR headset just a few years ago. And when I first put it on, it took me a little while to adjust to the concept because it felt so entirely different from anything that I'd experienced that I was actually a little nervous and jittery while I was playing. I was hyper aware of my surroundings because I didn't want to trip over anyone, but I was also incredibly concerned about avoiding experiences that would make me too motion sick because, as it turned out, playing for too long would make my stomach so queasy that that feeling might last for a day or more after I was finished playing. But once I got into it, and I mean really into it, like when I first played a 20-minute Star Wars game where I could fly around in an X-Wing and shoot TIE fighters, then I was hooked for a while. And it actually made me see the potential for playing video games quite differently than I ever had before. Suddenly, my inability to use my body to rotate my point of view or my place in the game world felt really limiting in games that weren't in VR. Things that video games love to throw at you, like instructions or interfaces or menus, they don't work well in VR, and I actually craved more intuitive experiences that didn't require me to read so much. And I had some really neat experiences that I just couldn't have any other way. For example, I played a pinball game where I could actually stand in front of a virtual pinball machine and have an arcade-like experience, which was really cool, considering how hard pinball machines are to find these days. I played a giant robot game where I could shield myself by holding up my shield arm with one hand, and then I could shoot at enemies from behind it with my other hand. I played another Star Wars game where I battled alongside Darth Vader with a lightsaber, a real working lightsaber. I played a space travel game where I could visit and explore other worlds and catalog the things I saw in them. I played a game called Rec Room where I could enjoy paintball and table tennis and dodgeball and laser tag and even frisbee golf without leaving my living room. And I could even talk to the other players using voice chat when they walked near me. Some of them were even from other parts of the world, like Australia or New Zealand. It was undeniably cool to be able to have these experiences. But then I just sort of stopped playing VR and I went back to more traditional games. My excitement over the technology had diminished to the point where just didn't want to be bothered with it anymore. And many of the newest, greatest games didn't work in VR that well anyhow, or at all. The technology was cool and it could do a lot of neat stuff, but ultimately it didn't supplant the more traditional methods of gaming. And to be honest, it probably never fully will. What's more likely is that it'll exist in parallel to video gaming, or perhaps even remain just an extension of it. After all, many popular games do have VR modes, but they're designed to be more than just VR games. Well, I mention all of this because I want you to understand that that's how qualitative research tends to function when new technologies arise. Believe it or not, VR and AR are both being used in qualitative research today for tasks like simulated shopping or for showing off product labels or prototypes. You can do a lot with these technologies where you can really create an immersive world in which you can show your participant things that don't exist or which aren't easy to showcase. But aside from some very specific or high-end applications, these methods just aren't right for a lot of qualitative research, and I don't think we're anywhere near the awkwardness of virtual reality interviews or virtual reality focus groups when the actual reality is that webcams on a flat screen serve the same purpose. But what I do think is that exotic techniques like VR tend to provide opportunities for augmenting more traditional methods. Much of the time, they'll find some intersection with other modes of research, or perhaps they'll be scheduled in tandem or in sequence to support other methods. Sometimes, a qualitative and quantitative approach will even be smashed together in a single hybrid study. Combination and convergence are inevitable as research methods evolve. And at the end of the day, these disciplines are both really pointing towards the same goal anyway, gathering good, reliable information for the purposes of filling an informational need. So I want to briefly show you now some tables from a recent issue of the Green Book Industry Trends Report, or GRIT, which is a publication about the marketing research industry. These data come from 2020 when the COVID-19 pandemic was at its initial peak. And I just want you to notice, first of all, how many, in this first chart here, of these traditional methods of qualitative research are still in heavy use. Online methods grew to the point in 2020 that many researchers were using them, but there are almost as many telephone IDIs, or in-person IDIs, or in-person focus groups being conducted during the same year. Many of the more cutting edge or exotic methods weren't being used much at all. And even the automated interviewing AI that I mentioned in the last lecture is down near the bottom compared to all of the human administered online approaches that are near the top. Then take a look at this radial graph over here. Nearly half of all research projects in 2020 were quant only. Nearly a quarter were qual only. And nearly the same proportion was a mixture using a hybrid approach. This number, this hybrid approach, grows every few years, and I expect qual only is going to diminish to about 10% as time goes on. We're going to see a lot more hybridization going on. Now let's look at emerging methods. This is for both qual and quant, and the first three big methods that are used are actually used a lot more in quant than in qual. Mobile first surveys, text analytics, and social media analytics. But then look at this. Mobile qualitative is being adopted by 54% of researchers on both the buyer and the supplier side. 45% are adopting mobile ethnography. 39% are using eye tracking. 26% are looking at facial analysis. And even at the bottom of our list here, 18% are looking at VR. There's some new and exciting stuff ahead, and this shows you some of the many techniques that are being considered on both the qualitative and quantitative side right now. And it's important that we, as researchers, are aware of what's coming. So here are four approaches that are not emerging, but which are fairly modern, and which could form the shape of some of the research methods in the years to come. All of these are in use, but none has really caught on yet as a popular method. So the first of these is a digital video diary. And these have become very popular as a method of sort of a pseudo-ethnography, where you can instruct participants to gather information and send them out with mobile devices or webcams to get that information. And one of the things that it really provides is participants can get really into it and give you some perspective and information that's really useful from their point of view. It's almost like seeing through their eyes, and it's really easy to understand. But one of the biggest drawbacks is that it's biased heavily towards people that are outgoing and tech savvy. You're not going to get people that struggle with technology or who are really shy to participate in a method like this. Also, participants are only going to show you what they want you to see, and they may filter things out. Now, they may not always be as savvy about this as they might think they are, but a lot of times they're going to show you the life that they want you to see and not necessarily the life that they actually live. Also, they can grow bored and cease participating, which means you either need to incent them or keep them really heavily engaged. Another approach is the web-based Delphi discussion. So a Delphi discussion is sort of a group discussion where you have SME subject matter experts conversing in a way that they are playing off one another and sharing perspectives. And it can be really useful and really helpful. It's kind of like having a focus group with a room of experts, like a panel discussion. You often get a high level of engagement and knowledge, and it can go on for days or weeks because you can have these Delphi conversations go on as long as people are willing to participate in them. But one of the problems with Delphi discussions is that experts do tend to take sides or argue minutiae that are not necessarily as useful. People that are not able to be as verbose or as to articulate their point of view as well as others can get drowned out. And then engagement of those with lower expertise is often lower. So people that don't really feel like they have as high of expertise as someone who's truly an expert might feel like, this isn't really for me, and they may drop off or not participate as much. Another thing that we could think about are chat room IDIs. And another variation of these, by the way, is using bots that can actually run the chat rooms. But chat room IDIs are a quick and easy in-depth interviewing format. They can be immediately transcribed, and participants have time to think carefully about the answers as they type. So as they're participating in a chat room or in a chat bot forum, they have a lot of time to think about what they want to say before they actually say it, which is nice. It corrects some of the verbal problems that we have in group discussions. But we lose nonverbal data. It's completely lost. And unless we can get people to augment that with maybe GIFs or emoticons or emojis or other things like that, we completely lose it. People often write differently than they speak, which alters their voice, and that's important too, because it can change the way that they articulate or express something in a manner that is less natural. And it also tends not to get as deep of information from participants, particularly those who are not good at writing or typing ideas. Again, Encouraging them to post rich media or links to things that connect to what they're saying can be helpful, but then it becomes really obvious sometimes how much people think in terms of cliches and memes and things like that. And that's not always useful for research. It can be useful for kind of getting an idea introduced, but then going deep, it's hard to do. As I mentioned, chat rooms can also be administered by chat bots. So one of the things that you can do is you can program bots that can continue to ask questions and probe on things that are said so that you can get better, deeper conversation without having to have a human intervene in all of the chat rooms. And you can also do these individually as chatbot type interviews where it's just a single user chatting with the chatbot, and those can go on as long as you want them to go. So there's many opportunities with these, and they are being utilized today, but nobody has really figured out a great best practice platform that a lot of qualitative researchers can get behind just yet. Another thing that can be used are web-based observation tools, and these can be done using primary or secondary media. And what's nice about these, and there's a lot of different techniques out there for social media monitoring, both quantitative and qualitative, but they can be unobtrusive. There's a wealth of available secondary sources out there that you can just scrape and scan. Live streams can provide easy primary sources. In particular, if people are putting videos out there or putting things out there that can showcase what's going on in their lives, you can get that information very quickly and easily without any need to even ask permission for it because it's already out there. And what's nice as well is many researchers can participate simultaneously. But one problem when you're observing things like video is that it distances observers. So you're not really watching real people. You're watching kind of a projected image of people that isn't quite the same as talking to them in person. And even if it's primary, where you're asking them to upload things or share things in a community, you can still kind of put some distance there that makes it hard for you to really understand them as people. Secondary sources are often filtered in less obvious ways as well. And much as I talked about with the digital video diary, people show you what they want you to see. They don't always show you the truth. And then there's a reduced ability to ask in-the-moment questions of subjects unless you're using a more primary observed source, which again, when you're doing that, people tend to answer questions in a way that might not be as natural as if you're just observing how their behavior is without those kinds of prompts. Of course, while all these ideas sound cool, it's important to remember a lot of people who commission marketing research are still not very sophisticated users of it, and the reality is they're only going to purchase what they really understand. In-depth interviews and focus groups are going to be a big part of that demand, and whether they're administered in person, via phone, or via webcam, or some other method, those are going to be the techniques qualitative researchers are going to have to stay the best versed in because that's where the demand will continue to be. It's possible some of these methods may even be automated one day, but I suspect humans won't be replaced entirely. Rather, they'll be augmented to conduct better research. Many quantitative focused research firms feared for the worst when computerization replaced their need for human beings to crunch numbers or administer surveys. And some of them did go out of business when they focused too much on doing things the old way rather than instead of learning to embrace what was new. But there's continued to be a demand for people who can design research, write good surveys, provide strong analysis, and explain what was learned. Automation just can't replace that. And that's a good lesson for qualitative researchers to learn as well. We can admire and enjoy all the new ideas technology brings along and all the wonderful ways that it can help us to get better data. But at the end of the day, the end users need people who can walk them through what was learned, who can explain it, and who can help them feel comfortable with the methods used to get there. They are not ready to step into virtual reality yet for that purpose. At least, not yet. Well, I hope you enjoyed this lecture, and in our next one, we're going to wrap up this class with a quick review. See you there.